So as we approach the Christmas holiday here, one thing that always comes to mind when thinking about astronomy is, of course, the story of the Star of Bethlehem. And I've heard lots of natural explanations for the Star of Bethlehem, and of course there is the supernatural explanation. And I want to point out that I have no desire here whatsoever to impose upon you a particular set of beliefs or to interfere with beliefs. Believe what you will about it. But I will say I am quite intrigued by this particular natural explanation. I had read it before, actually several times I had heard it, but I never really gave it any credit until I saw it. And we, of course, could see it with this wonderful software here, Stellarium. So a couple reminders, a couple things to point out before we do this. First off, I have heard plenty of other natural explanations. A comet would be a possible phenomenon. You could end up with a long period comet or even a comet that comes in and goes around our sun only once in a parabolic or hyperbolic orbit that would be a transient feature that you would see but would go away and not come back. And that would be viewable night after night after night and be a viewable phenomenon in the sky. I've heard supernovas blamed for it. There don't seem to be any good supernova remnant candidates for it, but still that is a possibility. And of course, there's like I said, the supernatural explanations. But those are probably the only valid natural explanations outside of this one here. This one here is intriguing to me. So anyway, astrology was a big deal in the ancient past, and astrology, of course, is the study of the stars and how they affect your lives, and that does not happen at all. But there are some interesting patterns, and because it was important to the ancients, they followed the patterns. They really mapped and charted this stuff well and paid attention to details like this. So it wasn't just like you go outside tonight and, oh, hey, the moon looks pretty, or there's Mars. No, they cared vitally about these things, or at least there were people who did care vitally about these things who then shared that information with the culture at large. So we're going to take ourselves back to about the time of Christ's birth here. We're actually going to back up to 2 BC, which here is -1. You can see I have it set here at New Year's Day, January 1st, -1 for our year. Because Stellarium has a year 0, there is a actual -1 here would be what we would call -2 or 2 BC because we don't have 0 on our calendar. And in full disclosure, full honesty, this is one of the biggest downsides of this particular theory is that this particular phenomenon would have happened after the death of Herod, who died at 4 BC, and we know that Herod was ruler at the time of the birth of Christ. Now, biblically, there are 2 Herods there, and the Herod that was around at the birth of Christ died at 4 BC, and we are almost 100% certain of that. And when the original Gregorian calendar was created and the years were set, there was a mistake, and so the birth of Christ was supposed to be right there at the boundary in between -1 and 1, when there's no year 0, but there was a mistake made, and most scholars agree that Christ was born at least by -4. I've heard as early as -7, as 7 BC, and that is one of the downsides. Having said that, there's also evidence to say that the traditional nativity probably did not happen. That you probably did not have shepherds and wise men there at the same time, and it is possible just because of the amount of time it would have taken to travel that the wise men would have come even later, or when Christ was maybe no longer an infant but still a young child, and that might allow for something like this to have taken place. But the date is an issue for this particular event. This event definitely happened in 2 BC. So anyway, if we back up to 2 BC, here we have the planet Jupiter, and Jupiter is beginning to approach towards the star Regulus in the constellation Leo the Lion. Of course, Leo is a lion and was considered to be the king of the constellation of constellations. I mean, he is, the lions are often associated with royalty, and here's their little drawing of Leo. I've seen him laying down in most drawings. I actually tend to prefer that myself, but there's their drawing of Leo, and you have Jupiter, who's named after the Roman equivalent of the Greek Zeus, the king of the gods. And so you have the king of the gods approaching, going into the kingly constellation and approaching the star Regulus, which notice the similarity to the word regal, is actually referring to the kind of royal nature here of the um, uh, of the constellation of the lion. Anyway, I'm going to center on Jupiter here so that we stay focused on Jupiter. I'm going to back out just a little bit to keep the ground visible for a moment. Now, one thing I want to point out is just like any night, stars rise and set, and so they rise over one horizon and set over the other. So there I just advanced through one night. So we're going to skip through on days here and look at how these arrangements change day to day. Because remember, planets got their name because they were considered to be wandering stars. They were stars that moved. If you follow this across the sky, the distance between the nebula and Regulus is always the same. But the distance between Jupiter and Regulus is changing, and that's because we know now, of course, that Jupiter is a planet in our own solar system and does move relative to the background of stars. Jupiter also, interestingly, has about a 12-year orbit around the Sun, and so would spend about a year in each of the zodiac constellations. There's 12 in the ancient way of looking at these things, zodiac constellations. It turns out there's actually a 13th constellation that lies along the ecliptic that they ignored, and there's lots of other reasons why astrology is wrong, but we are not going to get into right now, but somewhere else in the class. But anyway, watch as we advance the nights here, what happens to Jupiter. So here, Jupiter is coming close to, and here we have a conjunction in early February, or excuse me, early January, between the Moon, Jupiter, and Regulus. But that's the start of something special going on. And then here we get to Jupiter getting incredibly close to Regulus, and then right as they get so close together, here we have another conjunction on February 16th, where you have the Moon possibly even at some point here occulting or going in front of, oh, zoomed in way too much there. The Moon possibly occulting or going in front of the star, and Jupiter there going by the star. And so you have this great conjunction, and this would have had a major significance for them. Then we see Jupiter pass out of the constellation Regulus, and then here the Moon comes by again, and the Moon's going to come by every month. And as we keep advancing the days here, we can see Jupiter slowing down, and now it's moving back towards Regulus again. So it was moving away and has actually entered retrograde motion. This means that the Earth has actually lapped Jupiter in its orbits, as we talk about when we cover models of the solar system, that we used to have these odd shapes for the orbits of the planets to explain these backwards motions that they did, but planets that sometimes appear to go backwards through the sky because our viewing angle is actually changing. And so then we get this retrograde motion. And this retrograde motion brings Jupiter right back by Regulus, and here we get another Regulus-Jupiter-Moon conjunction. And now, what happens here? Look at this next planet. This next planet here is Venus, and Venus is coming into the mix. And so now we have Venus forming a conjunction and getting right in here in line with Jupiter and Regulus in the month of June. So now we have the king of the planets and the queen of the planets. I mean, the planet named after the goddess of beauty, all close to the royal star in the royal constellation Leo, and this happens right as this begins to set in the west. No, I had an astronomy teacher who showed me this, and he said one of the downsides is the setting in the west here, because the Bible story talks about how we have seen his star in the east. But if you actually go and look at the history of it, it is frequently believed that the wise men would have come from the Middle East or even further east from Bethlehem. And if you look at a map, of course, the nation of Israel, where the country, or excuse me, where the city of Bethlehem is right on the Mediterranean. It's on the east side of the Mediterranean, and so you can't come from the west towards the east towards Israel and Bethlehem, but you would have to come from the other direction. And I always like to point to the song "We Three Kings" of Orient are. Orient referring to the fact that they came from the east. And so the biblical phrase when it says that we have seen his star in the east actually probably means we were in the east and we have seen his star. Now, this is not a single star, of course, but it is several. Of course, they would not have realized that these planets are not stars. The moon being something other than a star probably was well understood, but they imagine the planets to be wandering stars. And here we have just this amazing conjunction, and then it sets here in the west, and they say, something important must have happened over there to the west. We're going to go that way. You can add on to that if these were Babylonian scholars, specifically from the Middle East region around Iraq and Iran, that they probably would have even been well aware of Jewish prophecy, because the Jewish people had been exiled there for a while, a few hundred years before BC. I want to say the exile happened around 500 BC, give or take 100 years. And so then they probably would have been well aware of Jewish prophecy and of astronomy, astrology in and of themselves. They would have been watching for signs like this, and they would have seen this, and it would have said, "Oh, go to that place," not just go somewhere east or west, from the east to the west, and hope you get lucky. They probably knew exactly what they were looking for. So I was just impressed when I saw just how special this set of maneuvers in the night sky were. That we start out with Jupiter approaching Regulus. We have the moon join the mix. We have Jupiter turn back around and come back towards that star. We then have the moon join the mix again, and then we have Venus join the mix for the heck of it. It is very impressive as a set of celestial phenomena, and I could see this being interpreted, construed as the Star of Bethlehem, the which is never actually a phrase used in the biblical sense. It is we have seen his star, and maybe his star is a set of star signs here together. It's at least interesting to think about and cool to see. It's just such an interesting merger. In fact, it is believed that these things would have gotten so close right there. I missed this one here. That right there, that they probably actually overlapped and blocked one another out on the 17th of June here. I didn't quite stop there and point that out earlier. But this overlapping here, it happens at most once every 2,000 years, and is probably even more further spaced apart by that than that. It really says that something interesting is going on here if you believe that the stars and planets tell you something about your life. So it's something to think about, and like I said, believe what you want about this. But either way, I hope you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays and all of that. And I hope you're entertained, if not enlightened here just a little bit.